So I want you to jot down 3 observations that you made from looking at this data, whatever they are, and whatever you're seeing. Put down 1, 2, 3. What's 3 things that you notice? And they can be even pretty simple things. You know, I'm not looking for you to solve all the world's problems. Just I want you to be able to look at the thing and tell me what you're seeing. Yeah, you're supposed to. Yep, you write right on there. Your 1, 2, 3. You can put right on there. So remember, your 3 things can be pretty simple. All you're trying to do is, I'm not even looking for you to necessarily interpret why or anything. Just make 3 observations of that data set. Give you 2 more minutes. Make sure you got 3 things. Again, they can be very simple. All right, 30 seconds. If you don't have your 3rd thing, pick out something so easy like this number changed from that number to that number. That would be something pretty easy. All right, so let me backtrack and tell you where this data came from. So in the back of your chapter of chapter 17 that we're on, there was a link to a website and there was some questions. So I went here. This is the first time I've actually gone to this site because I was looking for something different, and then I kind of stumbled into this. And every Thursday, the Federal Reserve gives out reports on what's going on with reserves, which is one of our main topics of this chapter. And so I clicked on this, and this is the data that was spit out by the Federal Reserve, called the H14 document, apparently. So we've got average daily figures from the week ended October 22nd, October 15th, October 23rd, and we can see the way different variables have been changing over time. So securities held outright, notes, bills. This is all the details. When we've done our simple little balance sheet, we haven't had this much to look at, and you can see why if we're just starting to learn this thing. And then as I scroll down, I found this. And this is the thing that I printed off for you for October 22nd, 2014. This was the maturity distribution of the different types of holdings that they have. All right, and then let me see what else. We'll come back up to that. Mortgage-backed securities, face value, book value. I'll just kind of scroll down. Some stuff, some more stuff. Oh wow, here we got it broke down to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Richmond, Atlanta. So here's here's Kansas City, all of the Federal Reserve banks, and what their portfolio holdings are. That's kind of interesting too. I didn't even scroll down this far earlier. So you and I are looking at this for the first time. All right, so that's it. So this is done every week, and so then I just wanted to see, well, how did that thing change over time? So what did you guys come up with? And then here's how far back this thing goes. 2011. This is every week now since 1996. Every week since 1996. So you can pull up that report on what the Fed's up to. So if nothing else, it kind of speaks to some level of transparency that the Fed has. This is open to the general public. They can go in and see where the Fed's at with this stuff. All right, so what did you have for your observations?
Clearly, since they're actually doing it every week, that doesn't matter as much. But I noticed that at least these ones we had here was like every 3rd October. So.
Okay, so what did I include for the thing? So what did you have for dates?
October 22nd, 2000. Well, October 29th, 2008. October 26th, 2011, and October 22nd, 2014.
All right, so that's a good place to start here. So this was the most recent. It was just released. I heard on NPR this morning that this afternoon at 2 p.m. Janet Yellen's going to get on and talk about how they're going to wind down quantitative easing. And that's part of what we're looking at here is the books on what they're going to be winding down in terms of their jacking up the money supply. So I thought it might be kind of fun to look back over this time period during the month of October, what was going on with the holdings. All right, so what other observations you got? What are some things that you saw that you thought stood out?
U.S. Treasury securities holdings have only been increasing when something's been dropping.
Okay, so U.S. Treasuries have been doing...
Holdings. U.S. Treasury securities holdings.
Okay, and let me put the document camera back All right, and what about them? What was your takeaway from that?
They've been increasing, like and it says under A11, but the total
Okay,
has
so
been increasing exponentially.
all right, so yeah, we've got this pretty major increase over time. Okay, so on that line item, good. What else? Yeah, Jason.
Kind of going with that, I noticed that the
Okay. So the distribution, what numbers specifically are you talking about?
specifically the
The
holdings got
holdings.
bigger as the
So what is this distribution? Are you talking about, you can help me point out here. So from this distribution going this way
no,
over
the A11 down.
A11.
Just the whole thing.
Oh, the all. Is that what you mean by A11? I think that's just all, 2 L's. I think. Okay, so all, I think that's the summation of all of those. Okay. So yes, that all across the board. Now you were looking at the distribution of these. So across these types of holdings, here and then here. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. So what's the difference in the distribution?
In 2008, each has, they all, there's not a zero for one thing and the other two there were zeros. And
Right.
the numbers are a little more even than in the other two.
Yeah, so we got the 3, 3, 4, and up here we're at 2.5, 39, 1.7, so that distribution. Yeah, good. All right, and all of those are representing what? What is the stuff that is the distribution of? What are these things over here? Just want to think about what exactly that is. So we got U.S. Treasuries, federal agency debt securities, mortgage-backed securities.
Are those all active?
Those are all assets, yeah. So those are when the Fed goes out and does an open market purchase or sale. Purchase, remember, it's buying the bonds. So if Cadence is holding on to a mortgage-backed security, she's a big investment banker, and I say, hey, I would like one of those, and I pay with erasers. I'm the Federal Reserve. Erasers are the new money that can be transferred. Right? I'm going to buy her bond, and I'm going to give her an eraser, and now there's more money out in the system. Well, now me, the Federal Reserve, I'm holding on to a mortgage-backed security, which means that any payments that flow from that security go to me, the Federal Reserve. So now if Corbin is a homeowner, and he's making his mortgage payment, that money ultimately flows to me. In kind of a roundabout way, I have rights to that mortgage-backed security. The flows, the payment of funds that flow from the holder of this security is entitled to that money that comes in from Corbin, Mr. Homeowner over here, making his mortgage payment. So as he makes his payment, what happens to the supply of money? It goes down, right? I'm holding the eraser. The eraser has come home to Janet, right? And now what Janet does is if she wants to continue to keep more money in the system, we start thinking a little bit differently about money because now we're changing the rate of purchases. Because now I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to go to the market and buy another one of these suckers. And now I'm holding the security at a different point in time. And then Sawyer, Mrs. Homeowner, pays her mortgage off. And now I've got the mortgage and the money. So if I don't continue to be active buying securities in the marketplace, eventually the money supply will start to fall as the Fed collects on its assets. So that highlights why it's always a continual active thing of the Federal Reserve participating in the bond market or buying securities of any kind. Okay, questions or comments there?
So the zeros mean
Oops, sorry, I got it wet. You have a wet spot.
Sorry, so that means like the zeros mean they have none, they're not holding any at that point.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were holding them before. So now as we start to think about this distribution or composition of the Fed's assets, it looks a heck of a lot different in 2008 than it does in 2014. That distribution or composition of their assets. And so, what are the implications of that? How much money did the Fed have in longer term securities in 2008? Let's say over 10 years. In 2008, what did it have? 101, right? So here's this column. So now what we're looking at is the Fed is holding on to these securities, each of which has a maturity to it. How long does that security? So if it's a treasury bill, it's usually going to have that money flowing back to the Fed in fairly short order. 30 days, you can look at this, 15 days, 16 to 90, 91 to a year. What is the rate at which the money supply is expected to come in if everybody pays their bills, which is a different question. But if everybody pays their bills, that's the rate or the pace at which money is going to come home to the Fed. Now, how does that look in 2014? A lot more long term. That is this, what's sometimes called Operation Twist, or the quantitative easing, is the Fed got into longer term securities. It had really never done that before. So this was all in response to the current financial crisis, and now we see it in the data on the Fed is holding 1.7, the majority, look at that distribution, 1.7 is being held with this security, which is pretty important, isn't it? Because next year, what is this composition going to look like? How big is this going? How far is this going to go down? Not very, very much if we just allow the money to come in, right? Now the Fed can also just dump those back on the market and do an open market sale. The mortgage-backed securities, somebody out there is willing to buy them. So Janet just has to call up Federal Reserve President in New York and say, sell those suckers, we're getting out of the mortgage-backed securities. And as she goes out and dumps mortgage-backed securities on the market, she can more quickly change the composition through actively engaging in the marketplace, right? So she doesn't have to wait for the money to trickle in. She can put it in right away. But we'll see what their strategy is. Nobody knows. You know, we've talked about the mystery of the Fed. They don't come out and say, well, this is what we're planning. This is how we're going to do it. We'll see what their announcements are today. They're just going to make general comments. Remember what Alan Greenspan's quote was that we read during one of those case studies? Just the general gist of it.
If you know what's going on, you probably understood it all.
Yeah, something along those lines. If I was, and I don't know the quote either perfect, but if you thought I was very clear about what we're doing, then you probably misunderstood me. So that's not going to change. So we're not going to know these details, and that's pretty important because how does this make you feel if you're a mortgage-backed security holder or dealer? That the Fed has a pretty large sum and kind of a mysteriousness to what they're going to do with that. You know, does that create more uncertainty or less uncertainty if you're a mortgage-backed security investor? More, right? So that's the idea here is it creates a lot of uncertainty, which changes people's behavior. And the economist would say that's probably imbuing a lot of volatility into that market, because with the uncertainty, we're not having really efficient transactions take place because it's a little more speculative. You know, they're having talks with their buddies. Do you know what Janet's going to do? No. What about you? Well, I could go to Vegas this weekend, but instead I'm going to buy some mortgage-backed securities. What the heck? I think I'm going to go short on them because I think Janet's going to start selling these. So if Janet starts dumping these on the market, increase the supply, what happens to the price of these bonds? Go down. So an increase in the supply drops the price. And so there'll be some speculators out there that are going to play that game, and they're going to anticipate maybe that there's going to be mortgage-backed securities dumped on the market. Okay. Any other takeaways that you had on your paper that you want to share?
I mean, you kind of already mentioned this, but like how up until a point they stopped just limiting themselves to the short-term securities, but not only have they limited themselves to that, but like back in 2008, the majority of the numbers are in the within 15 days and the within 15 to 90 days.
Yeah.
And then as we move forward, those first two columns become really sparse, and the last columns get much more
Right.
attention. So it's not only like we're allowing ourselves to do this, we are moving what we're doing to this point.
Yeah. Yep. And and some of that was writing their own new rules as they went. That's kind of luxury being the government, and especially being the Federal Reserve. They don't have to go through Congress to get the okay. They can change the rule book anytime they want. That's what real true independence is. As you guys, did your presentations on different banks around the world, if the Fed can truly move in and just about do anything they want unchecked, that's about as independent as you can be. And that's kind of where our Federal Reserve is. We believe that we've got some smart people there, and there's kind of internal checks and balances, hopefully, with these committees and the people and the input and all of that. And then ultimately the transparency that we expect that, hey, you can do anything you want, but don't forget, 5 years later, we're going to be looking at your beige book, and it's your dirty laundry is going to come out. So there's kind of checks that way that we don't think people are going to go crazy, and we have some trust with them in that. But there's plenty of people on the other side of that disagree that that's a good way to move forward. All right, good. Any other comments or questions?
When it says loans, is that money that the Federal Reserve is loaning out?
Yes. I think, let me just make sure. I think it would be the loans to federal banks. Where is that?
Just as top, the very top says loans.
Oh, different types of loans. Yes. Yeah, so look at, and that the 2008 doesn't have that exact, oh yeah, it does have, it has other loans, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. That one has fallen.
What is term option credit?
Those are, I don't understand all of the intricate details of those, but they are a little bit more sophisticated instruments where you agree to repurchase it back at the end of a term. So all the terms of the deal are set up so that you're kind of playing a shell game, and at the end of the day, it's kind of a loan essentially in one direction or the other because of the contractual agreement to buy it back at a fixed price. So instead of doing a bond where you're subject to the market, like when Janet's holding on to the mortgage-backed securities, and if she wants to sell it a year later, it's going to be determined by the market price. It's already been fixed ahead of time. So those repurchase agreements and term options.
Is that what you just said, reverse the purchase agreement?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so good. Let's any other last comments, questions there?
Why is the smallest time maturity 15 days instead of a month?
Why is this?
Isn't it normally like the smallest time frame?
Well, it could be a 30-day instrument that only has 15 days left. So that's like the time remaining of whatever they're holding. In fact, this could be a 5-year treasury note that's coming due in the next 15 days. Yeah, that has 10 days. Yeah. So this is just the amount of time. So when we look at this, we're kind of saying of all the financial instruments it's holding, what is the timing of when these will pay off?
So one thing I kind of noticed, that's kind of a question in common, is for the loans, if this is what Federal Reserve is loaning out, is it the number that they're loaning out, or is it just how many they have still to loan out?
I would
That's
think
how-
it's dollars, but yeah.
For under loans, because it's like 4,000.
So the amount of loans historically and still true today is fairly low of the loans that they make to banks, because banks tend to not go to mom and dad for a loan if they don't have to.
Right.
They'd rather deal with another bank with the federal funds rate, which wouldn't show up here.
Right.
So this is through the discount window. So it's that number being small is normal as a fraction of what the Federal Reserve does. This is the majority of how it controls the money supply, and is through the open market operations.
Okay. So like as it decreases from 2008, 11, and 14, like in 2014 it's 0 all the way across the board until within 15 days. Or yeah.
You're tracking this number coming across?
Yeah.
That the 240 here is all within the last 15 days.
Yeah, but there's nothing.
Which probably is a signal that banks are regaining their health, that there's a lot less loans that are actually outstanding. Yep. And I think that's true. That makes sense with the
Makes sense
with the
with
recovery, and that's why they're going to start
Yeah.
pulling things back. Good. All right, so let's tackle. I thought it would be fun to hit that first. Before we jump into the exercise, we need to finish off the little monster that we started last time, to think about the actual money multiplier. So what we're doing is we're reconciling the monetary base and the money supply. The connection between the monetary base and the money supply. So the money supply is M1 and all the stuff that's out in circulation. So we had currency plus checking account deposits, if we just kind of keep it simple at the M1 level. And then we've got the monetary base. And what was in the monetary base? Currency plus reserves. Yeah, total reserves in the system. So all banking reserves. So the monetary base is the Fed's liabilities. So when we use the word reserves there, it's all of the reserves that are in the banking system. All right, so I think where we left off is that the monetary base, let me do this in, I guess, 2 steps. Currency plus reserves. And we can rewrite that as currency plus the required reserve ratio times the amount of deposits plus excess reserves. Required reserves plus excess reserves. So little r was the required reserve ratio. That's one of the variables set by the Fed, right? The Fed determines how much of deposits have to be held back. That was big RR, required reserves. So all we're saying is that the total reserves in the system can be broke down into required reserves plus excess reserves. And what was the key thing with excess reserves again? That why we highlighted them? What was unique about them? What's that? They can be spent, loaned, yeah, spent by the bank but loaned out. So the loaning of the excess reserves is kind of the key part. All right, so then I gave you the currency ratios, which I'm going to kind of rewrite here anyway, so I think I'm going to skip what we did last time. Well, I'll write it to the side here. It wasn't too big a deal. The little c was equal to the amount of currency being held as a fraction of deposits, and then the other leakage was the amount of excess reserves as a fraction of deposits. This was the leakage that occurred from the multiplier because people were holding on to cash, right? Potentially, if they're holding their wealth in the form of a currency as a fraction, as opposed to deposits. And then the other leakage was if banks weren't loaning out excess reserves. So how much excess reserves are banks holding as a fraction of deposits? So these two things are just going to be inserted into our concept of the monetary base. But they represent the leakages from the multiplier. Backing up one more step, remember we did the deposit multiplier? But in order to do that, all that money had to be held in the form of deposits. And we said that it might be true that people hold cash, and it might be true that banks don't loan out all that they can. So that's picking up those two areas to create the real world multiplier as it relates to the monetary base. So the monetary base, currency could be thought of as currency, trying to do this without screwing it up here, currency plus times the amount of deposits. All I did was took this little guy and put this one over here to say that if we think about currency, it's the currency ratio times the amount of deposits. Where I'm going with this is I'd like everything expressed as a function of deposits is where I'm going. So currency plus deposits, plus I've already got the required reserve ratio as deposits. And now I'm almost home free. I'm just taking this equation here and I've got excess reserves. Let's think of that as E, little e times D. Little e times D. Now, math people, what can I do to this expression?
D times C plus R plus.
All right, factor out that D, right? So if I do that, I've got C plus R plus E, little e, times D equals the monetary base. Or putting this expression over to this side and leaving the D all by itself, except I'm going to rewrite the D here, we get 1 over C plus R plus E times the monetary base. All right, we're getting close, but we're not there yet. I've got a relationship now between the monetary base and deposits. What I'm looking to do is have a relationship between the monetary base and the money supply. So I'm not quite there. So I need another equation. Let's recall that the money supply, that's going to be like M1, is equal to checking account deposits plus currency. This was our M1 definition. If you want to put a little highlight here, we're really assuming it's M1. But the supply of money can be thought of as the amount of checking account deposits plus currency. We're right back to chapter, what did we do that, chapter 3 or something early on? So our first measure of money. Well, now I've got D as this sucker here, right? D equals this ugly monster. So I'm going to throw that sucker in there. I also have a C, though, don't I? C is this little guy here. C is actually up here, but we can do that same little trick we did before. So let's do that. We're going to do now M, continuing right on with your paper down the line, is equal to D, which is really 1 over C plus R plus E times the monetary base, plus currency, which can be thought of as just C times D. Okay, so I think I actually kind of confused confused it one step. I should have backed up a step. I don't know, sorry to mess up your paper here a little bit, but if I do C times D, before I jump back over there, M equals D plus C plus D is a different way of expressing the money supply, right? And so then we can do the same little factoring thing. This is factor out the D and we get 1 plus C times D. All right. And so what does that allow us to do? We get M we got two expressions for M. We got the monetary base. Deposits or monetary base. What can I do down here? I really shouldn't have jumped here first. Let me help your eyeball. We've got monetary base, we've got deposits, we got an M here. Yep, for this D. Yep. So then I'm going to have my connection back to money supply and monetary base, and I've gotten rid of the D. So if I take, let me call this equation A, just to make sure you're clear here. And this is, maybe I should have said, maybe I should have just did a whole bunch of numbers here. A, B, C, and D. If we put D into B, we're going to come back to this one, but stubbing D into gives us D equals, we've got D equals 1 over 1 plus C times M. And then we've got B telling us this. So we've got 1 over 1 plus C times M equals this ugly thing here, 1 over C plus R plus E times the monetary base. Equation B, yeah, sorry. I labeled these all A, B, C, D. What I'm looking for is to have a relationship between the money supply and the monetary base. Last step. This guy goes up top, 1 plus C over C plus R plus E. This is the money multiplier. So if you didn't understand all that math, write this down at the last step. That's your key thing. Your textbook does a pretty good job of walking you through that whole calculation. There's PowerPoints and all that, but this is the multiplier. Now let's get back to the intuition of it. Turn to your paper, the little problem that we got. Suppose that the currency in circulation is 600 billion, the amount of checkable deposits is 900 billion, and excess reserves are 15 billion. Part A, calculate the money supply, the currency deposit ratio, and the excess reserve ratio, all of which we've got up here. Just plug and chug some numbers, pull out your calculator. You can pull out your phone for a calculator if you need to. Work with your neighbor or those around you. Cadence, if you want to move and go sit by Alyssa, you're welcome to, whatever.
Aye.
The answer is 2.13. The multiplier, I'm just giving you the answer. You need to still calculate it. You'll need to calculate it on the test and on your quiz, but just so you can check your work. No, no way. I know. I did have a PhD professor who could do crap like that instead, and we were pretty blown away. But he wasn't a very cool guy. He was kind of nerdy. So start with those ratios. That's the, well, actually you can do them right in the order of what the question asked. The money supply, the currency ratio, the excess reserve ratio, and then finally the multiplier.
What was Russ?
Yeah.
It was the required reserve rate.
The required reserve ratio, but here you're just looking at the excess reserve ratio for now. But you've got excess reserves,
We actually need the
and then you've
required.
got total.
Don't you need the required?
You've got the
Find
total
money
amount.
multiplier.
You can kind of work it backwards from there.
Required reserve ratio, are we assuming something in here or are we not?
You can calculate it with the information you got.
Are the excess?
So you've got excess reserves, remember?
Oh, no, I have that right here.
What's that?
The excess reserves, did it say 1.5 or?
It's 15.
15. Oh yeah, the print's a little. Yeah, the excess reserves are 15 billion. It's not 1.5 if you're.
That's a huge number.
All three of them are combined, is that correct?
All two of them.
So check the deposits minus and circulation.
Yeah, so you got 1,500 for that. Yep.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, which R are you talking about? Yeah, so you got excess reserves, you got the money supply. With what's there, you can calculate.
So we have to calculate what the required reserve ratio is.
Yep. All right, there's your homework problem.
I did not get 2.
All you got to do is part A. We'll do the rest on Friday. Time to go.